After revealing himself as the source of one of the biggest intelligence leaks in U.S. history, 29-year-old Edward Snowden is now, man, you might say, on the run, hiding in Hong Kong. The ex-CIA worker turned national security agency contractor told Britain's Guardian newspaper he was staying at a hotel in Hong Kong in hopes to win asylum in Iceland, which he says is a champion of internet freedom. Now, the Justice Department could charge and seek to indict him, then seek to extradite him. The U.S. has a strong extradition treaty with Hong Kong, but there's an exception for political crimes, which Snowden's act could fall under.
I'm no different from anybody else. I don't have special skills. I'm just another guy who sits there day to day in the office, watches what's happening, and goes, this is something that's not our place to decide. The public needs to decide whether these programs and policies are right or wrong.
And here's what we know about Edward Snowden. He's never finished high school, but he did obtain a GED. He enlisted in the Army, but was discharged after breaking both legs in a training accident after just 5 months. He started working as a security guard for the NSA, but eventually got hired by the CIA before fleeing to Hong Kong. He lived in Hawaii, earning a salary of roughly $200,000 a year, working for defense contractor Booz Allen Hamilton. Now, meantime, we just got the first reaction from the White House to the revelation of Snowden as the leaker.
There is obviously an investigation underway into this matter. And for that reason, I am not going to be able to discuss specifically this individual or this investigation. You heard the President talk on Friday on a couple of occasions about his views in general of some of the revelations that have been made, the leaks that have occurred. And I think he spoke fairly expansively about both his concerns and his belief that we need to strike the appropriate balance between our national security interests and our interests in privacy.
NBC's Ian Williams joins us live by phone. He is in Hong Kong. So, Ian, there's a lot of conversation about international laws, treaties, extradition treaties, but there's also a word that Hong Kong could say, we don't want to turn him over extradition, but we will expel him if he is in fact in Hong Kong. What are you hearing there?
Well, I'm not sure about the expulsion because Hong Kong has always been as closely followed the legal process. We're hearing through local media reports that one Edward Snowden checked out of a hotel on the Kowloon side of the Hong Kong harbour around lunchtime today, but there's no word as to where he went or indeed whether he's still in Hong Kong, although that is the presumption. Now, as you point out, Hong Kong does have an extradition treaty with the U.S., and in the past there's been pretty close cooperation in terms of when the U.S. have requested people. But obviously there needs to be a charge, and Snowden has not broken any Hong Kong law, which means to say that it would be difficult to see how Hong Kong could simply expel him if their own laws haven't been broken and if there is no charge against Snowden here in Hong Kong. Now, there is a bit of a mystery. He did cite coming to Hong Kong because of the strong legal system, the tradition of strong human rights. This is a legal system that was inherited from the British. But a lot of people here are a little bit puzzled about this because there is this extradition treaty, and yes, there is a political opt-out clause, if you like, and China does have an ultimate veto. But nevertheless, most extradition requests to Hong Kong have been successful. There has been close cooperation in the past, and it's just been a matter of time. So one question being asked here is, he did mention Iceland. Well, why didn't he go to Iceland straight away, but instead of coming to Hong Kong? So there are a lot of unanswered questions here, and clearly the Hong Kong police are not commenting at this point. They say he hasn't broken any laws. They have no idea about his whereabouts, but the media here is working itself up into a frenzy as they try and track him down, Tamron.
All right, Ian, thank you very much for that information. Now let me bring in our News Nation political panel discussing this. MSNBC political analyst and Bloomberg View columnist Jonathan Alter and Washington Post national security correspondent Greg Miller. Thank you all for joining us. Greg, I'd like to start off with you because there is the lingering question of charges, and I was fascinated by some of the articles. The most popular today regarding this NSA leak are all about Snowden, who he is. People are fascinated to the fact that he didn't graduate from high school, but he landed this job making over $200,000, and what real access he had.
Yeah, I mean, that's a remarkable and so far kind of unexplained aspect of all of this. Not only that he ended up in this high-paying job for Booz Allen, but that he was apparently hired by the CIA with very thin academic credentials, which, you know, in the aftermath of 9/11, the agency has hired thousands and thousands of employees, but almost all with college degrees, especially for jobs with such a highly technical nature like the one he says he filled there.
And beyond his background in these dribs and drabs, even down to the fact that he donated to Ron Paul some $250 to his presidential campaign, Greg, the question is, will the Department of Justice seek charges here? And at least according to this article in Politico, they talk about the extradition treaties, and they say that the one between the United States and Hong Kong contains an exception for political crimes, a category Snowden's admitted acts would almost certainly fall under. Even so, Hong Kong could decide simply to expel him without turning him over to the American authorities. But they also point out that it could be, and it sounds something like a spy movie, essentially kidnap him while there and bring him back to the United States. What are we hearing at least the Justice Department is considering?
Well, I think there's no question that the Justice Department is going to pursue this. I mean, we've seen the Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, say that he's all in favor of that, and the White House has sent similar signals. And presumably he would be charged with violations of the Espionage Act. And as you say, the real question is, well, what are the mechanisms at work now for getting custody of him? And that's yet another puzzling aspect here, his decision to flee to Hong Kong instead of somewhere else, and his declaration that he will now seek asylum in another country where he might be protected. But it's you know, this is all, it's undoubtedly going to play out over some length of time, just as it has for Julian Assange in London, who is the creator of the WikiLeaks website.
Right. And to your point, Greg, he could end up at a consulate of a country in Hong Kong and seek some kind of protection, exactly what Julian Assange has done. But Jonathan, let me bring you in on the political ramifications. And there's still many questions. Ted Cruz now on a radio ad questioning the administration and this grab of information, as he's referred to it, on his radio ad. But you have some who say, libertarians in particular, that if this man is charged, and he could face, according to the information, at least two kinds of charges under the Espionage Act and maximum of 10 years in jail for each of those charges, that the Obama administration would face a huge uproar from libertarians.
There's a fascinating case of strange bedfellows, Tamron, between the far left and the far right on this issue. Civil libertarians in both cases, principled on this particular issue, but taking American politics in a new direction. Remember, during the Cold War, there really were not voices, saying that people should not be prosecuted on espionage charges, because at that point the Republican Party had pretty much thrown in its lot entirely with its more hawkish, hardline elements. At the end of the Cold War, it was suddenly possible for libertarians like Rand Paul and Ted Cruz to a certain extent to, in the United States Senate, to actually make common cause with people on the left on these issues. One of the other fascinating dimensions of this is, does this tend to break down, at least in some fashion, like the drone issue, the intense hyper-partisanship of the last few years, where you might have some new coalitions on national security policy, which would be very, very interesting.
How much does that weigh, I guess I should say, how much of Snowden's background and who he is, perhaps, could that play a role in how long this stays in the media? You bring up the drone issue, Jonathan. When you looked at the national polls, people were on the side of the administration. They felt that it kept us safe. If, for example, Snowden is the truth teller, as his code name was in Latin, might more people get behind him in a way that Bradley Manning saw support, but from a very small niche group of people watching the news?
I think there might be a few more in this case. I wouldn't say it's going to be a majority, but the difference between the drone attacks and this is that people feel that, whether they're right or not, it's an invasion of their own privacy, which, the shoe's on the other foot now. So you also have a situation where, in his presentation, while he wasn't exactly, wouldn't call him appealing, he did make an argument that he had not just blown secrets willy-nilly, reveal the names of CIA agents or do that kind of thing, that he had been rather selective, unlike Bradley Manning, in what he chose to release. And I think that also could, win him some new followers. But I think most people in the mainstream of the country will believe that the government does have an interest in keeping its secrets.
Greg, let me play a little bit more of what Snowden said regarding the ability or the authority, is the wording that he used, to wiretap anyone, and get your reaction to that.
I, sitting at my desk, certainly had the authorities to wiretap anyone, from you or your accountant to a federal judge to even the president if I had a personal email.
Your reaction to that, Greg?
My reaction, I guess, is one of a bit of skepticism. There are a couple things he said in his in that video and in those comments that that seem like they possibly might have been exaggerated. He also talks about possibly being rendered by the CIA back to U.S. custody or pursued by an ominous organization he refers to as the Triad. And so I think that we may end up learning that these materials that he released are authentic, but his sense of his own role and his descriptions of his own positions may contain a bit of exaggeration.
But Greg, what about the ominous threat, though? Greg, the ominous threat that there is more, that some of it was held back because it is so sensitive, but there is more to come.
Well, I mean, that certainly is true. It's not clear to me how much of it will now be released, but even here at the Washington Post, I think that, we've written that we obtained far more slides than we actually posted. And after consulting with experts and government officials on the sensitivity of some of the information contained in those slides, and trying to avoid putting, people or specific operations in harm's way. So there's been some real deliberation here over these things. But I think also Glenn Greenwald from The Guardian, as recently as just an hour or so ago, has been saying there's more to come on this.
And we know that Snowden contacted the Washington Post around the same time as The Guardian. The timeline is intriguing, but has there been any recent contact to the Post from Snowden?
Well, yes. I mean, if you see today's paper, you'll see that Barton Gellman, who was the reporter who Snowden approached, had a chat over encrypted chat service with him just yesterday as his name surfaced. So he has been in contact with the Post since then.
All right. Thank you very much, Greg Miller, Jonathan Alter. Thank you both. We have some developing news.